I was selfish and I wanted what I wanted when I wanted it. And I did not think about anybody else and how that was going to affect anybody else. Alcoholics don't have the market cornered on selfishness and self-centeredness.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you're all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA, deep in the heart of Texas. That was the voice of Lori G from Al-Anon that you heard at the beginning of this here episode, and you are going to hear so much more from her in just a moment. But first things first, this here episode is being brought to you by Brad. So you ask yourself, what did Brad do? Brad went to our website, Brad went to our website, www.soberspeak.com. He clicked on the little yellow donate tab and he made a contribution. So thank you so much, Brad, for your generosity. This here episode is coming right out to you. Episode number 299. So let me just go ahead and say this right off the bat. You're probably going to hear it in my voice. And as you can tell, I stumbled there just a little bit on the beginning. And I can tell you this, that my balance is off as well, because I always stand to do these things. And I've actually had to catch myself a couple of times. I've got a little thing called, and I'm sure none of you have ever had this before. It's called, what's this called again? Oh yeah, COVID-19. I thought all this stuff was over, but apparently it is not. But we're recording an episode anyway, because you don't have to stand next to me, right? It's no big deal. But I can tell you, I am feeling a little lacking in energy. But I also want to say this. I don't know what it is, but I feel, I talked to my friend Rick R. the other day, after his he had a hip replacement surgery, and I was reaching out, just kind of checking on him, make sure that he was doing okay. And what he said is, he goes, physically, I'm having to use a walker to get around, but excuse me, you may hear that a couple of times as well. He says, but I am spiritually and mentally as strong as I've ever been. And that's how I feel today. Now, if you listened to the episode last week, what I recorded on the beginning, I was not feeling spiritually and mentally at my best. However, I don't know, maybe COVID does that to people. Maybe this is one of the side symptoms, whatever. You know, you can't taste food and then you get spiritually and mentally all kind of straightened up. I don't know, but nonetheless, so that's what's going on with me. And enough about me. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so I have this is a piece of listener feedback, I guess you should say, and that is, this came from a gentleman named JT, and I wanted to read it right here at the beginning of this episode. We'll have more listener feedback later. In fact, there's plenty of it because I didn't do any last week, but nonetheless, JT writes in, and he says, "Hi, John. My name is JT. I am currently incarcerated, and I have been involved with AA for several years now. Thank you for the good work you do to make Sober Speak possible so that everyone, both inside and outside, has a chance to hear powerful messages of experience, strength, and hope from so many other wonderful people who I have come to adore. The guest sharing their experience, strength, and hope through Sober Speak podcast has revolutionized my understanding of the 12 steps in my relationship to AA as a whole. I am so grateful to them all, the guests he's talking about. My life and spirit has been uplifted and positively transformed, and I thank you for connecting me with Brad. He has been helping me, and I am proud to call him my sponsor. So, just so you know, he had written in before we got JT in contact with Brad, and Brad, a friend of mine here in Frisco, has graciously agreed to sponsor JT. He says, I am so grateful for so much goodness coming into my life due to Sober Speak. I'll be sure to pass it on. I want to also take a moment to honor Charlie P., who I recently heard has gone on to join the big meeting in the sky. He is one of my favorite people. I have listened to all of his talks on the podcast more times than I can count. His emphasis and discussion of what he calls self-peace on pages 60 through 63 of the big book has brought about no less than a spiritual awakening in my life. I encourage any listeners out there to check out Charlie's episodes on the Sober Speak podcast, especially episodes number 195, which is called So Our Troubles We Think Are Basically of Our Own Making, episode number 203, Second Surrender in Alcoholics Anonymous, and episode number 212, Pivot Point in Alcoholics Anonymous. I feel very fortunate to have the ability to hear Charlie share his experience, strength, and hope with us through Sober Speak, even though while he was living actively through serious life challenges. I heard him carry the message that gives life to what is said in the third step prayer, to what is said in the third step prayer and mentioned in the book, and as a result has brought me closer to the God of my understanding. What a true gift. Although my encounter with Charlie was only through the Sober Speak podcast, I have no doubt he will be affectionately remembered by all who have known him and all who have heard him talk. I'm sure many others are with me as I send a heartfelt thank to you, old Charlie P., up there at the big meeting in the sky. JT. Well, that just brought together several of my favorite subjects. One is that we're reaching people who are incarcerated. The other is our friend, Charlie P. By the way, I want to let you know, JT, I sent that message along to Katie, his wife, and she immediately sent a message back saying how much she appreciated it and how much she loved it and how much it meant to her. So it brings together Charlie P. It brings together my friend Brad, who is not only him. There are several people that are gracious enough to give of their time to sponsor people who are incarcerated, or communicate with them, and or just be an ear, just somebody they can lean on while they are incarcerated. And I understand that a lot of people cannot email. A lot of people that are incarcerated cannot email. And we're working on a solution to that issue right now. They can hear it, but they are unable to email, but they may be able to communicate with us through a mailing address. I don't know. It just brought together a lot of different subjects that are dear to my heart. And I really appreciate you writing in, JT. I told you when I communicated back, actually through Brad, that it made my day. And I really meant that. All right. Now, on to Lori G, part 1. So, episodes number 299 and episode number 300 is going to be Al-Anon-ish. It's going to be Lori G is what not Al-Anon-ish. It's going to be an Al-Anon episode. So this is part 1 of Lori G, and you're going to hear the second part of Lori next week. This one is called Al-Anon. Alcoholics don't have the market cornered on selfishness, which I love. Okay. Lori is in Al-Anon. She resides in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I'm sure some of you have heard on our podcast before, or you just know him from conferences or whatever. Both Lori and Cliff G is her other half. And we're going to have him back on at some point here in the near future. But anyway, her recovery date, Lori's, is July 1st of 2001. We discuss her upbringing in a small town in Oklahoma, what she and her husband call a 2-story house. You'll have to hear that. We talk about the subject of vulnerability and how that helps not only her, but others. The big book's place in Al-Anon and what it should and should not be, at least from her opinion, so to speak. When she was working at a bank and her quote solution walk through the door, and much more. And we'll have plenty of listener feedback at the end of this. And remember, we're going to follow up with the second half of Lori's story next week. And believe me, you want to tune in for the finale. It is quite a ride you do not want to miss. Excuse me. I told you I was going to stumble over this stuff. Enjoy Lori G, and I will have plenty. I just thought about something. That sounds a little bit like Ali G. You know who Ali G is? The actor. Well, he wasn't an actor. Somebody played a character. I'm sorry, Lori. I'm so sorry I did that. But nonetheless, enjoy Lori G, and we will have plenty of listener feedback at the end of this here episode. Enjoy. Okay, everybody. So today we're sitting here with Ms. Lori G. And Lori, I am going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself. Now, generally speaking, I have people at this point give their sobriety date as well, but you're not going to do that. And there's a reason for that. And I'll let you explain that. But go ahead, introduce yourself, tell people where you live, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Okay, my name is Lori G. I'm from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and I do have a recovery date, and it's July 1st, 2001.
So the recovery date, which is a little bit different than, and you said 2001, is that right?
That's correct.
Which is a little bit different than a sobriety date. And why don't you tell people what your recovery date for you at least signifies?
So that is the day that I started on a journey into Al-Anon. And I started my 12-step program. That was actually the very first meeting that I ever went to. And people have marked their date in Al-Anon differently. Some people do it by their very first meeting. Some people do it when they first get a sponsor. Some people do it when they start working the steps. But I was kind of, I never took a break from the time that I started going to Al-Anon. I never quit. I never stopped. So that's my date.
So, and I'm sure we've been through this with other Al-Anons at best, but I didn't. So there are different kind of obviously sober is sober. Well, I'll take that back. There are some people who go on the marijuana maintenance program and continue with that sober date sometimes, but usually they kind of come to their senses after a while. But there are different ways of measuring your recovery date in Al-Anon. Do most people do it by their first meeting, or do you know?
Now, I think everybody's different, and a lot of people call it their serenity date and Al-Anon, and that's fine. I don't know why I chose recovery date. I just think because that was the beginning of my recovery. And I think people do. I think people just do whatever is more comfortable for them. I mean, I also have known people who have been in Al-Anon for a long, long time, and didn't really get serious about it until months or years later, and they don't start their date till they really start working the program.
And I do want to mention right here on the beginning of this, you are the better half, for lack of a better word, of somebody that we've had on the podcast in the past. His name is Mr. Cliff G. And how long have you all been married?
We've been married 23 years.
That's great. And I know we're going to get into some of that in just a second. It hasn't all been rosy, but you've been able to work the steps in your marriage. And y'all also do, if I'm not mistaken, you do kind of some traveling together sometime, go to conferences together. In fact, now that I'm thinking of it, Dan G, who was at the Crested Butte conference, actually gave me you and Cliff's names. When y'all travel out there, are you usually doing like a combination thing or your solo thing or a little bit of both?
You know, most conferences that ask us to speak, most of them ask us together. They want an AA and an Al-Anon. And they kind of get it's rare to have couples that go out that are in AA and Al-Anon that speak. We're kind of a rare breed anymore. And so usually when we get asked, they want us together because they want to hear the Al-Anon side and the AA side. But very little of our stories are like rebuttal or anything like that. It's just, it really is kind of two separate deals. But most people just like having us together, and we do a lot. We do travel a lot, and we do it a lot. And most of the time, I would say probably 90 to 95% of the time we're together.
And did I hear you refer to it one time as a 2-story house that you live in?
There's a kind of a joke. Cliff says we live in a 2-story house, her story and his story. And I say we live in a 2-story house, his story and the truth. And because, a lot of the stuff that that is in his story has been told to him. Not that he actually remembers, but that has been told to him. And if you're an Al-Anon of my type, we remember it all, every detail, and we can pull it out at any moment's notice to let you know. The recall is great on that.
What do they say about Bill Wilson? He wrote "As Bill Sees It," and Lois wrote
"Lois Remembers."
Yes, and she remembers very well.
Or Bill, yeah. Is that how it goes? Yeah.
I think right. It's like "As Bill Sees It," and Lois actually remembers that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go back before July 1st of 2001, because there's quite a backstory there. You grew up in Oklahoma, is that right?
I have been born and raised in Oklahoma, and didn't grow up in an alcoholic home. My parents are not alcoholics. And I did have a brother that died of this disease about 4 years ago. But yeah, born and raised in Oklahoma, came from good stock, knew right and wrong from the get-go. I grew up in church, had a dad that was as old as everybody else's grandfathers my age. My dad was a Depression kid and was in World War II, and instilled in me a good work ethic, and again, taught me everything that I needed to know from a moral standpoint. So we didn't even have drinking in our house growing up. I mean, we just didn't even have it in our house. So parents weren't alcoholics, didn't grow up in an alcoholic home, not my story at all. And we lived on a little 10-acre farm. We had dairy cattle and beef cattle and all the things, and a huge garden, and pretty much lived off the land, seriously. And I grew up in this little town on 10 acres, and everybody in that town knew us, and I knew everybody in that town. My dad helped start a church there, and he wasn't a minister or anything like that, but he was a deacon of the church, and he helped start that church. And I was told that we used to have services in our home before the church was built. So again, good, solid foundation, good background. Everybody meant well. And, I was taught everything that I needed to know. And, but that didn't keep me from going way astray and having a lot of stuff happen to me in my life. So, but yeah, just a small town girl.
So you said it was good solid stock which you came from, which I
I
love.
did.
And you mentioned your brother there. My guess is we're
Mm.
going to get into that a little bit later. Was that your only sibling?
Now I had two older sisters and I have an older brother. And uh, my brother was 6 years older than me. And, my brother started getting in trouble at probably, he started running away from home. I remember him running away from home from the time from the time he was about 11 or 12 years old. And, you know, um, I now know it's all about that restless, irritable, and discontent. I had no idea what was going on at the time. I just thought that he was just being a troublemaker. And, and I think he started drinking at a very young age. I think he was like, I don't know, probably 15 years old, 14, 15 years old when he started drinking. And it just progressed. And he was 56 years old when he died. And he had literally drank himself to death. Um, and so, but my elder sisters don't have a problem. I have one sister that, has drank and done other things her whole life. And I like to tease and say she doesn't have a problem and she's not an alcoholic, but she gives a good impression of one. And, and, and I had another sister that came into this program and, she came into AA. She went into the AA program about 15 years ago and she stayed for about 7 years. And then she called me one day crying. And I answered the phone and I said, "What is wrong with you?" And she said, "I don't think I'm an alcoholic." And I said, "Well, why are you crying?" And she said, "I really want to be." And, and I said, "Well, what's going on?" And she just explained to me that she felt like a fake and a fraud in those meetings, that there was a lot of the stuff that she could not relate to as an alcoholic. And that she had went back through the 12 steps with her sponsor, and her sponsor said, "Nobody can tell you if you're an alcoholic or not, but I'm going to make an exception in your case. You are not an alcoholic." And she's not. She's really not. And but she loves AA and she loved the fellowship of AA and she loves being in the rooms, and she still does. She still loves AA and she still loves the fellowship of AA. But when I asked her, I go, "Why did you come to AA in the first place?" She said, "Well, if I'm being honest, I thought my husband at the time would follow me into the rooms." And that's when I said, "Well, welcome to Al-Anon." Because we are focused on the AAs and what they're going to do and what we try to get them to do. So, but neither one of them really have a problem. I don't believe. And then, my brother drank himself to death. And then there's me who I've never had a drink or a drug in my whole entire life because I went the opposite direction and tried to control every single thing around me. And I just figured if I never drank or did a drug, I would not be affected by alcoholism. Of course, I didn't have those words at the age of 6 or 7 when I made this decision. But I just knew that they had gotten into a lot of trouble. It seemed like they were having a lot of problems, and I wasn't going to be like my brothers and sisters. And so I was never going to do that. And I'm stubborn. So I stuck to my guns, and I just never have. And I know today that is about control. That is trying to control my environment, my situation, thinking that it's going to be okay. And obviously that control really worked out for me because here I am on a podcast talking about Al-Anon and the effects of alcoholism. So it's the way it usually works.
What about your parents? Did they stay together?
They did not. When I was 7 years, I always say I had a really great life until I was 7 years old. And when I was 7 years old, my parents got a divorce, and my mom moved me out of the country to a suburb of Oklahoma City, and I hated it. And I hated it because I was teased for the first time. Kids were really mean to me, and they teased me and called me names and tripped me going down the hall and threw things at me on my way home from school and all the things that kids do. And they teased me because I was the ugliest kid in school, and I had buck teeth really, really bad. And I had these eye teeth that were growing out through my gums. So I looked like a vampire bunny, and I had a big nose. I got my nose fixed in my 20s. My doctor told me, he goes, "Your nose would look better on a man." I said, "It does. It's my daddy's nose." And, and it looked great on my dad, but it did not look great on me. And I had these big thick glasses because I couldn't see 3 feet in front of my face, and I was a tomboy. My brother wanted a little brother. Wanted me to be a boy when I was born. He had already had two older sisters, and he got me, and so he just did the best with what he had, and I did all the boy things, and I've always been my whole life was really pretty much more comfortable around boys because I was a tomboy and I rode bikes with the boys and I raced cars with the boys and I climbed trees and played football and all the things that the guys would do, I would do because I was just more comfortable doing that because I've been doing that with my brother. And so I was a tomboy. I wasn't real hygienic because I was a tomboy. And so they teased me and they had a lot to work with. And so I hated it. I hated it. And my mom worked during the day. I was a latchkey kid. And I had, again, about control. I had decided if you're going to be mean to me and if you're going to hurt me, you're not going to get close to me. And I just decided I didn't need friends and I didn't have friends. That was a choice, again, control, a choice that I made at a young age. And I just would go home after school and lock myself in the house and read a lot of books and watch a lot of TV. And that's just kind of what happened. And my dad's house was totally different. My dad had this girlfriend and I hated her and she didn't do anything to me. I just hated her because she was my dad's girlfriend and I didn't want him to have a girlfriend. And so I would go over to my dad's house and then we always wound up going over to her house for dinner. And then they were always working on a project of some sort and doing things together. And I just kind of felt like I was around my dad. But my dad had rules and he was a disciplinarian and I knew to follow the rules and I knew to do whatever he wanted me to do. And I did. And my mom, I didn't have any rules. I could do whatever I wanted. She was gone a lot. And when the divorce happened, she started going out on weekends. And I've already told you she's not an alcoholic and she's not. But she started going out on weekends and she started going out pretty often and pretty regularly. And I was left at home a lot by myself and I kind of took care of myself. And I learned how to, I would clean the house and I would fix my own meals and I would take care of myself and I would do the laundry. And what I know about that today that I didn't know then is that I know I was doing those things thinking if I do all this stuff, she'll stay home. Mm-hmm. She'll be home more. And again, she wasn't going out to get wasted. She was going out to find him. She needed a replacement husband. And I didn't understand that at the time. Totally get that today. Totally understand that today. And so when I turned 13, my dad married that woman and she became my stepmom. And then my mom married my stepdad and my stepdad did a lot of good things for me. He got me braces and he got me contacts and he taught me a lot of stuff. He was a smart man. And he taught me a lot of stuff and he took me to buy store-bought clothes for the first time. Up until that time, I pretty much had hand-me-downs or garage sale clothes or whatever. And he was really good to me in a lot of ways. And I always want to stress that because we always had a power struggle relationship really. Cause when he came into the picture, he wanted to be the parent and I had kind of taken over that role. And, I thought I was doing a pretty good job at it. He did not. And, so we always had a little bit of a power struggle, but he really was good to me. And I know that he really cared about me. But he was also a sick man. And, I now know when I didn't know then, but he was probably alcoholic. And, what happened was when I was 16, I caught him watching me take showers through the skylight in the bathroom. And I caught him a few times before and I told my mom about it. And my mom came in one night when this happened and I turned on the shower and listened and waited for him to get on the roof. And I went and got my mom and it was 11:30 at night and she heard him on the roof and she came out and he came in the back door and she said, "What were you doing on the roof at 11:30 at night?" And he said he was cleaning the gutters. And, and what I know today is that my mom was so scared of losing him and losing that security that I don't think it's that she didn't believe him. I think she was absolutely terrified. And that's kind of how our relationship kind of ended. I got asked to move out of the house and I went to go live with my dad. And I didn't know that my stepdad was an alcoholic. I really didn't. I had no clue because I didn't know anything about alcoholism. But when I got in this program and I told my sponsor about him, she said, do you think your stepdad was an alcoholic? And I said, no. And she said, well, didn't he drink? And I said, yeah, he drank every day. And she said, well, tell me how he drank. Tell me about his drinking. And I said, well, he drank beer like I drink water. And by the way, I drink a lot of water. And I said, and then at night he would have a tumbler of Ezra Brooks and Coke, and sometimes he'd have two of them. And she said, well, why do you think he's not an alcoholic? And I said, because I have never seen that man drunk. And she said, how do you know you've never seen him sober? And that blew my mind. I mean,
Yeah.
it literally blew my mind. I was like, oh, I've never thought of that.
Right.
And looking back, I can see there was definitely a lot of the behaviors and the isms of alcoholism with my stepdad. And he later died. I never get a chance to tell that in my story. People always come up to me and go, what happened to your stepdad? And I was like,
Well,
oh yeah, he did pass away.
when did he die? How
He,
old were you?
I was 19 when he died. I had already been married and when he died.
Oh, because
And
wait, that was a 16 when you moved out of the house, right?
mhm,
So between
mhm.
16 and 19, well, there's a marriage in there. We got ahead of ourselves,
Yeah,
but you
yeah,
got married, and he actually passed away at the same time, or during
yeah.
the when
A
you were
little
19.
after that. He had a massive heart attack and died. And I had not talked to my mother for those 3 years. And
Did you ever get to go back and have a conversation with your mother regarding that whole situation?
my mother is still alive.
Okay.
And so we have had, yes, we have had, honestly, the first time that we had a big conversation about it, I will tell you, I was not kind, and we had a big blow up about it. I think it was all the stuff that I had been thinking and feeling for so many years. And somebody asked the wrong question. That's really all I can tell you. And I just went off on her, unfortunately.
How old were
And
you when you had that first conversation?
probably about 20 years old.
Okay.
It was probably a year after my stepdad died. And, and it took a long time, even after that, because I had not talked to my mom in 3 years. And then we were just starting to talk because she just needed help when my stepdad died. She didn't know what she was going to do. And I was, again, being the youngest and being the most responsible and the fixer of the family and the one that is always the one that takes care. Again, typical untreated Al-Anon. I came in to save the day and to help mom because, how is she going to do this without me?
Mm.
And so we were just kind of trying to get past all of that. But I was still really angry, and I was trying not to be and trying to act like I wasn't, but I really was. And then I blew up at her. She even after that blow up, we still talked, but not a lot. We really didn't talk for a long, long time.
So I want to say also what we were talking about before we started on the recording today. Because a lot of times I will ask the guest, whoever's here, if there's anything in particular they want me to, quote, avoid. Some people are going through legal situations and such like that. But I want you to say to the listeners basically what you told me about the good and the bad and the ugly. Will you let them know what you said?
Yeah. I just, I'm brutally honest about what has happened in my life and my role in it. And I look at my part, and I not only look at where my mistakes were and where I was wrong, but I'm very open and honest about that, because I just think that that's our job here. I mean, if me having a train wreck of a life and all the mistakes that I made doesn't do some good for somebody else, then what's the point? And I can't shade that or hide that. There's somebody else out there that I can help. I don't care who it is, somebody who's been in my situation or something similar. And, I think that God gives us our stories to help other people. And that's why I do what I do. But I don't hold back. I'm pretty honest about it. And again, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed of anything that's happened. I have some stuff that's not, that I'm not proud of and that I don't recommend, but everything has got me to where I am today. And I've learned a lot.
I also want to ask you, while we're while I'm thinking about it, because God only knows it'll probably slip my mind later if I don't ask you. But um, there is, and I've asked several people who have been on here with Al-Anon about this. I know that there's, I don't know if you call it a schism or you call it just a disagreement where the big book is concerned and Al-Anon, and people kind of come down on different sides of that. Can you talk to me a little bit about that from the inside out?
Sure. Um, I love the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love it. I really do love it. I think it's the only piece of literature where you can go and you can really get to understand what the disease of alcoholism is about. And it has the experiences in there, and it has everything that you need to know about alcoholism is in that book. Especially how to be treated for alcoholism is in that book. It is the blueprint. So I have every single one of my sponsees, I tell them all that they should get their own copy and they should read it. You just can't take it to a meeting of Al-Anon. That's the only difference. We have a lot of stuff that we can read on our own, as long as you just don't bring it into the meeting. And so, and I mean, we borrow from the big book when we're working the steps. I have them read the 3rd step prayer. I have them read the 7th step prayer. I let, if they want to do their 4th step, like the columns out of the big book, I have no problem with that. I have people who will say, well, the third step and the 7th step is AA. That's not Al-Anon. Well, they let us borrow their steps and traditions. I'm pretty sure we can take a prayer from them. I don't think that's an issue. So I think if you really want to know and understand the disease of alcoholism and how it affects alcoholics and the families around them, I think you should read it. However, I will say this. This is just my opinion, just so you'll put this out there. It is just my opinion and my opinion only.
Mm-hmm.
I do not suggest that you get an Al-Anon who is brand new and say, oh, go read To the Wives and then let's talk. Because I think it's a big mistake. You need to read all of it first. And To the Wives, just, again, my opinion, not the best written chapter in the book. I'm just saying. Bill Wilson wrote it, not an Al-Anon did not write this, not somebody in family. Bill Wilson wrote it, and he was only 4 years sober when he wrote it. So keep that in mind. Might have been a little bit self-serving is all I'm saying. Again, just my opinion, But we have fabulous Al-Anon literature. And I think my favorite pieces of Al-Anon literature is how Al-Anon works. And I really think that every Al-Anon, or maybe if you're just thinking that you might be Al-Anon, should get how Al-Anon works and read it and see if you can identify. Because if you can identify it all, in those pages, there's a really good chance that you probably need to go to a meeting and you could get some help.
Okay, so that's another question. In terms of resources, if you're listening to this, or if somebody's listening to this and they are thinking, maybe Al-Anon is for me. Maybe I identify with Lori G to the hilt. They should, number one, I guess go to a meeting, read that book. What's it called again? How
Al-Anon works.
Okay.
And the whole title is How Al-Anon Works for Families and Friends of Alcoholics, I believe is the whole title. Okay. But yes, listen, if you are related to, have friends of somebody whose drinking bothers you, I think you should at least try to go to an Al-Anon meeting. And, we tell you to go to at least 6 before you decide if it's for you or not. And I think you'll hear, if you're somebody like me, you're going to, the situations might be different. It might be your kid, but it might be somebody else's husband, or it might be somebody else's parent, or it could be somebody's best friend. The situations, the people may be different, but the feelings and the way that we react are usually the same or very similar.
Got it. Okay, so I got you off track, as I have a tendency to do. Let's go back. I think you were at you were at like 19 years old.
Yeah. So I met my first husband. Yep. I was turned 19. I met a guy, and I met him in September, and in November he asked me to marry him, and we got married in March. And nobody in my family was thrilled about that. I was 19, he was 27. Everybody tried to tell me not to do this. You don't know what you're doing. You're too young. You don't know him. And I knew, of course, at 19, I know everything, and I don't listen. I do not listen to anybody, because I just think you guys just don't understand and you don't know. And unfortunately, that knowing everything does not stop at the age of 19. That continues on through my adulthood. And but it was, and I'm going to tell you, I married him, and I instantly knew it was the biggest mistake of my life. But and again, I have these ideas, and I'm not really sure where they come from. And I don't really know where all this, at the time, this stuff that I know and the things that I believe and the things that are in my head comes from. But I just think I'm going to make this work no matter what. I mean, I've always been able to work hard. My dad has taught me, you can work, if you work hard, you can accomplish anything. And I cannot stand to be told I was wrong. I don't want to hear, I told you so. So I'm just going to make it work. I'm just going to do whatever I have to do to make it work. And I really tried, but it was doomed from the beginning. It really was. And,
Any children come out of?
so we got married, and I'm trying to make this work. And about 4 years in, I get pregnant with my son, because if you're having a bad marriage, bring a kid into it so he can be a part of it. And there's something about having a baby that does. I'm going to tell you, because people, it's never a fix. It's never a good idea. If you're in a bad relationship and you're bringing a kid in to fix it, it's a horrible idea. And that's not what I was trying to do. I didn't even try to get pregnant. I just got pregnant. And it does kind of give you a Band-Aid for a while. I mean, everybody is in this whole happiness, but new baby, everything's great for a while, but it's just temporary, because all those issues are still there and there's no fix for it. And so we stayed married for 8 years, and about a little over 7 years into it, I was trying to figure out how to get out of that marriage. And there's only certain reasons. Again, I don't know where all this stuff comes from at the time. I have no idea. But at the time, I believed the only reason you can get a divorce is if they beat you, if they cheat on you, or if they're alcoholic. And he was none of those. But had he been alcoholic, I might have still been married to him.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. Was he alcoholic? But he was not.
He was not.
Gotcha.
So, I was working at a bank. By this time, I'm living back in the country. I am driving an hour to the city every single day to work. I work at a bank, and my way out of my marriage walked through the door, and he was the best looking thing I've ever seen in my whole entire life, and still is. He was 5'6". I like short guys. I've always liked short guys. If you're short, I'm going to like you. If you're short and alcoholic, I'm going to love you. Just count it. And he was the attorney for the bank. He was on my board of directors, and he was on my loan approval committee. And every girl in the bank giggled and batted their eyes and flirted with him, and all the guys shook his hand and patted him on the back. And I literally could not form a sentence around him. I was so nervous, and I've never, ever had that happen before. And I've never had it happen since. And so one day he asked me to bring a file down to his office, and I do, and he takes me to lunch, and I start dating him, and I left my husband. And unfortunately, that's the order it came in. And unfortunately, those are one of those things that I do not suggest, and it's not a recommendation, but it's the truth. And it's not anything I'm proud of. And I'm going to tell you, I was selfish, and I wanted what I wanted when I wanted it. And I did not think about anybody else and how that was going to affect anybody else. And I always say this, alcoholics don't have the market cornered on selfishness and self-centeredness. And I hurt a lot of people by doing that, by making that decision. And I honestly didn't care. I really didn't care at that time. And so I start dating this guy. He's crazy. He's a lot of fun, lots of fun, very exciting, a lot of fun, absolutely insane. And we go and we start on our journey together. And it just and it just gets worse. I start dating him, and no matter what we do, we have a good time, but he's a little crazy. And people that knew me and knew him would call me up and say, "Is it true that you're dating Cliff?" And I'd say, "Yes." And they'd say, I'd go, "Do you know him?" And they'd say, "Oh yeah." And I'd say, "Well, tell me about him." And they'd say, "Well, he's a brilliant guy. He's one of the smartest men you'll ever meet." And I knew that. He did his undergraduate in 3 years. He graduated top 5% in his law school. He was 7th in his class. And they'd say, "And he's really successful." And I knew that because at the time he was first name partner in his law firm. And before he was 30 years old. And then they would say, "And he's a lot of fun." And I knew that because we'd had a lot of fun together. But then they'd say something like this: "But he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's arrogant, he's egotistical. You cannot trust him as far as you can throw him, and you need to stay away from him." And what I heard was, "He needs you." And I really believed that. That's exactly what I heard, So
All right. So, Lori, here's my thought is that you have not got to Al-Anon yet. And I'm not sure it's going to be anytime real soon. So what I'd like to do, if you're okay with it, is go ahead and schedule some time with you to come back and to finish kind of the second half of your story. Would you be okay with that?
absolutely.
That sounds good. So what I usually do here, and I'm going to do today, is I read from page 164 of the big book to wrap up an episode. And we'll wrap this up, and then we'll get you back on so the listeners can see what your entree into Al-Anon is all about.
Okay.
All right. Page 164 says, "Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us, like me and Lori G, as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then." Once again, Lori, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you again. And remember, everybody, we'll have the second part of Lori G next week on episode number 300. Can you believe we're at 300? And you're not going to want to miss that. So now on to a little bit of listener feedback. Oh, by the way, remember, we do not want you sharing your gossip or your toothbrush or your STD, but we would absolutely love for you to pause your device and share that episode with another friend or family member. It may be just what they need today. Now, on to a little bit of listener feedback. And by the way, okay, so the first part of listener feedback here is actually reviews. Okay, so here's the scoop. Really good podcasters, not me, they encourage their listeners to go out to Apple Podcast or what used to be known as iTunes and leave reviews all the time. I've done that in the past, but I rarely do it. And if you want to go out to Apple and leave a review, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Apparently, it helps in the search engines if you get a bunch of reviews and people are positive and all that sort of stuff. But if you don't, hey, I'm fine with that too. But I went back, I looked at some of the Apple Podcast reviews, and these are, excuse me now, remember I maybe coughing here a little bit. These are Apple Podcast reviews that are, my goodness. These are Apple Podcast reviews that I got from the website, and Conscious Marketing and PR said, this podcast is very much needed. It is so eye-opening to the challenges that come with alcohol addiction. Very much needed. So I don't know exactly who these people are. I guess they have, I don't even handles, surnames. I don't even know what you call that. But here's another one. It says, and thank you so much, Conscious Marketing NPR. Mary LaRue. I do like saying that. Mary LaRue. Sober in Montana is the name of this. It says, love you, John. Your humor is infectious and makes me laugh. I listen when I walk the dogs early in the morning. Each speaker teaches me something new. Keep it up, John Mary. Oh, and then I guess this is her sobriety date. It says 1/27/1990. I don't know. Maybe she was born then, but I'm just assuming that's her sobriety date, but you never know. Snoofy Foof posted in here. It says, phenomenal. I listen every day. Now, that is a heck of a handle there, Snoofy Foof, whoever you are. I appreciate you writing in. And then we have, Kelly E. Well, I'm not going to say the last name. I don't know if this is their last name or not, or just a pseudonym, or who knows. He or she, Kelly, I don't know. It says, great show, but lacks diversity. And he says, he or she says, lots of recovery and great stories on this podcast, but the host seems to have a lot of men on the show and very few women. Would love to hear some more stories from people who identify as non-binary / trans. I get it. It is free and I enjoy it, but the content only from men grinds my gears. All right. Well, I don't know. I think I've had a lot of women on. Oh, in fact, this episode right here, but who knows? I just wanted to read some of the content coming in. And by the way, I have been through this also before with anyway, I'm just going to leave it alone. But thanks for posting there, Kelly. I appreciate it. All right, now on to some, I guess, traditional listener feedback. Christopher writes in and he says, hey, John, what's up, man? So I thought you'd like to hear my experience with SoberSpeak. I got out of jail yesterday after a quick 30-day detox. Not recommended, but in my case, necessary. I'm one of those guys who can't stop when he starts and quit drinking and quit starting. When Marty C said, what Marty C said resonated with me and my whole being. So the last 20 days I was in country. I was in county incarceration. He said, I had a tablet and I found you guys. I don't know how many episodes, but I caught up with several each day. Between you and Marty and Father Bill W., Chris S., and many more, you guys were exactly what I needed. I'm headed back to an AA-based 12-step treatment center named Samaritan Colony in Rockingham, North Carolina. I pray I let it all out in my 5th step this time. Well, I do too, Christopher. And I look forward to finding a sponsor who sees the steps in a similar way to Marty. I've believed the same for some time, but I never heard it put into words any better. It's always been cool to hear someone else say what you don't have the words for. And Marty, my friend, is excellent at that. And he says, I've been longer winded than I planned, but I get excited about the deal. Love you guys for real, Christopher H. Well, Christopher H., it sounds like you, my friend, are on the right path. Just keep going. Keep us posted. And thank you so much for writing in. Coop writes in. This is our dear friend Coop that we know in the show well. He says, hey, John, as I sit and reflect back on the last couple of years, I am truly amazed. I celebrated 13 years on the 13th of June, and I cannot believe where I am spiritually. He says, I owe you and your podcast a debt of gratitude that cannot be paid. Thank you. I have a sponsorship lineage that has taught me so much about how this program really works. The lineage is now taking root here in Ohio. I'm pretty sure I will probably be fired from AA soon, as some around here don't like hearing about how the book really works. and they are so used to the group that they are so used to the group thought and all the cliches that get used as the program instead of the actual program. Good for you, Coop. He says, again, I want to thank you for getting me plugged into Gary and his crew. He's talking about Gary K there, who, if you listen to this podcast whatsoever, or at all, I shouldn't say whatsoever. If you've listened to this podcast very long, you will know Gary. Anyway, he says, I am learning all the things I don't know that I did not know. He says, I am learning all the things I didn't know that I did not know. All the love to you and yours, my friend, Coop. Well, Coop, right back at you. I'm so glad you got hooked in with Gary K there and all his friends and lineage there, and I'm thankful to hear all the updates from you, Coop. Thank you so much for writing in. Jason writes in. He says, "Hey John, I live in Lafayette, Louisiana. You know, I've been to Lafayette, Louisiana, like many times on business. I like it down there. I like they got those chickens that they stuff with all sorts of stuff and then they cook it, and everybody down there is fishing and hunting all the time. But anyway, I really love Lafayette." He says, "I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober since February 22nd of 2023. I have 3 months now. I found you on Amazon Music. I love your podcast and I treat it like a meeting between a meeting." Good for you. He says, "Of your speakers, I really enjoy the Earl H episodes, David G, Marty C, and many others. Thank you so much for what you're doing, Jason." Well, thank you, Jason, for writing in. And, I'm working on something with Earl H right now that I'm hoping we get to release sometime here in the near future. I'm not sure what kind of shape it's going to take, but I'm looking forward to it. Dave writes in. And he says, I know this, Dave. Yes, he says, "Hey, John, I want to thank you for your beautiful spirit. Your choked up sincerity speaks to me when the little cracks where God shines through." Oh, that's cool, David. Dave, excuse me. He says, "It's helping me in a difficult time. It's not easy having a good look at yourself." Man, do I understand that, Dave. I do. He says, "Thanks, mate. Davy down under." Well, Davy down under? Oh, and then he puts a big kangaroo in the Australian flag. I always like it when I hear from the folks down under. God, David, I remember Davy, excuse me. I'm Davy. I remember. Oh, and I told you this in an email. The night when you actually sent me that email, I was really struggling that night, and I'm not going to go all into it. I think I recorded about it last week, and I wasn't focused on what I should be focused on, which is helping others, and which is the God of my understanding and building that relationship. I was focused on all these things I was in fear about. And I got this, and this just kind of recentered me. And I really appreciate it when you guys write in like this. I really do. It means so much to me. So anyway, thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate that. And hopefully one day I'll get down under, mate. And I would love to meet some of the people down under face to face someday, but I don't know. We shall see. Charles writes in, and Charles says, "Hey, John, I know what this is." So my friend David G actually recently went and spoke at a convention in New Orleans. And they had heard David G. Charles had heard David G. on my podcast here. And he wanted to write in and just say this. He says, "Hey, John, David spoke at the convention tonight, and it was much better than fantastic. He brought me to tears. I found him on your podcast. God sends us in the right direction if we let him. Best regards, Charles P. from New Orleans." And by the way, if you guys are out there and you've heard something on first of all, let me back up. Charles, I'm so glad that worked out. I knew David G would work out just wonderfully for you. He's spoken at many conferences now, and he just does a great job. I'm sure you got to meet both him and his wife Sarah, and I'm just so happy for you. And if you're listening out there and you're thinking to yourself, how do I get a speaker from John M's podcast to come speak at my convention? Well, just give me a shout, John, John, at soberspeak.com, and I'll get you in touch with whoever you need to get in touch with, and we'll hook you up if schedules work out accordingly. Jenny writes in, and Jenny says, "Hello, John. I heard about Sober Speak. Oh, I remember this in a BBC podcast." So she was listening to, obviously, a BBC podcast, and the name of the podcast is How You Cope with Ellis, Elis, and John, John, in season 4. On the BBC, and I have listened to only one episode today. Many things that were noted in the BBC podcast resonated with me, and I felt it was a good promotion of Sober Speak, so I thought I would check it out. I am on the very edge of hopefully starting my recovery journey after many years of trauma. Thank you for your email. Kind regards, Jenny. So, Jenny heard us on this particular podcast, and I went back and I listened to it, and the gentleman on there brings up Sober Speak. It was really cool, and I don't know how to get in touch with them, but hopefully one day our paths will cross. And anyway, Jenny, thank you for writing in. I really appreciate it. And finally, an old friend of the show, Quan, Cuong, writes in. He says, "Hi, John. I'm still listening to your podcast while I work as a construction worker in San Francisco, California. I like to re-listen to podcasts after time has lapsed, because I hear it differently depending on what steps I'm on and if I'm spiritually fit. Keep up the amazing service work you do, Quan." So yes, I'm the same way when I listen to speakers after I've not heard them for a while. It actually, you hear it in a different way. And it's like reading the big book, right? Depending on where I am and what's going on in my life, I get to digest it in a different way. All right, everybody. Guess what? That the lovely Mrs. M has so graciously agreed to make me some dinner, and I am going to take her up on that and hopefully get to feeling a little bit better fairly soon. God bless you. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. And how's the other word? May God bless you and keep you until then. All right. Love you guys. Thanks for bearing with me on episode number 299 here soon. I take this 1 week at a time. Hope to be back next week, but one never tells. I don't know. This could be the last episode. Oh, but for Lori's sake, I hope it's not the last episode I ever release, because I really want to get the second part of her story out there. But, we're never guaranteed tomorrow. So, love you guys. Bye-bye.